as the Earth expands.
Okay. So it's sort of like the controllers are attempting to regain control?
Well, no. Let me put it to you this way, okay? The puzzlement for me has always been the many threads of evidence pointing to a planetary population reduction. Either all of these threads were placed there as a fear marker to make us all afraid and start this general level of fear that they could manipulate, or those items actually are evidence of a desire on the part of the populace, or the powers that be, to control the size of the populace. Yet I could never fathom that, because I was thinking, well, surely these people know that it takes all of us to support their lavish lifestyles. And without all of us, they're going to be severely impacted by how much good stuff they have. And they only have a lot of good stuff when there's a lot of humans. So there was never any net gain for them, in my opinion, to be stupid about how they manage the planet. Yet they continually appeared to be stupid. So I figured, well, it was maybe stupidity by design. Now, why would they ever want to eliminate the vast majority of the populace? And it just made no sense whatsoever. And then there has arisen, at least in my part, an understanding of one set of conditions that would explain it. And that set of conditions can be likened to the running to the extreme level of resource use. And if we were to consider the planet as a closed system like a petri dish, and our population as a bacterial colony within that closed system, then at some point we reach the limit that we can absorb nutrients from the system before the next generation must crash hard, because we've sucked out nearly all of the nutrients over the preceding 10, 12, 15 generations, whatever it is. In our case, as humans, it might be a 13,000-year cycle for all we know. But under those conditions, it makes sense, because the powers that be would certainly not want a populace in revolt due to lack of foodstuffs at a primary level to be occurring, because that is zero level of control. When you get to that level of chaos, they have zero level of control. And they like levels of control that are near 100%, and they want to get us as close to that 100% as they can possibly do so. And that really means that at some point, when they know that their ability to allow us to consume resources has reached a finite level. In other words, we can't add another layer to our pyramid scheme on the bottom relative to the biota on the planet, and we're reaching the limit of a giant ecological collapse, which will kill off a great many of us anyway, then it makes sense for the powers that be to initiate a depopulation program, just so that they are in control of the depopulation process itself, at least so far as they think. Make sense?
Makes much sense. Thank you so much, Clif.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Hi, Clif. This is Lolly.
Yeah, hello.
Good to speak with you. Last week we interviewed Dr. Joseph Farrell. I'm wondering if you had an opportunity to listen to that interview.
No, it's been a week from hell as we got into this. So no, I have not yet.
Okay. Well, he speculated that the weapons are being used to test and gather data, and therefore some of the earthquakes and extreme weather we're observing may be a product of this testing. I note here the earthquake swarms in Turkey, Nevada, and today we're seeing some in Argentina, and perhaps the deadly tornadoes in the southeast of the U.S. These events and others may not be naturally occurring phenomena, but man-made. Dr. Farrell also speculates that the use of these weapons is affecting solar activity, and again, some of what we are observing solar activity-wise may not be a natural occurrence, as Patrick Gerald's work and others might suggest, but the effects of human technology. His comment was that this was the really big story. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this premise, on Dr. Farrell's thoughts.
Yeah, I've explored the idea from reading McCanney and a bunch of the Electric Universe guys, as well as looking at some of Tom Bearden's stuff, that you could get a backflow through some of the scalar technologies and create these connections to the sun that would theoretically allow you to influence it. And such of the technology that they talk about, some of it anyway, is the Tesla arrays. And the idea is that you can get a pulse generated that causes a sympathetic response in the larger body at a distance over the course of time. And of course, it's going to require a certain amount of energy. I would agree with part of his premise that the events we're seeing appear to have a signature other than previous examples of natural occurring patterns. So in that sense, Haiti was anomalous, and the large Chile quake was anomalous, and there's anomalous conditions that existed about the Honshu quake prior to the tsunami that took out Fukushima. And indeed, they could be scalar weapons, and they're testing them and saying, okay, let's do this and that. There could be a war going on, whether you think of it as a atomic bomb test, or that kind of thing, the net result is a war going on. Now, I've seen a great many weird things with these glasses out, whizzing about in space, some of which I would not instantly recognize as being originating with a human mind. Just the way these craft moved had initiated a xenophobic response in me saying, hey, humans didn't invent that. We wouldn't do it that way, right? And so I would accept his premise that shit's on fire, but as to who actually lit the match and whether it was a local human or not, I don't know that I would be willing to speculate that far. And then as far as to whether or not it's affecting the sun, Tesla's work, and I've read a lot of it, suggested that he had some indications that it was technically feasible, but even he speculated that the amount of energy at the time he needed could not be found on Earth. Now, he may have, I didn't pursue that any further at the time, and he may have been just speaking about electrical generation capacity as opposed to total levels of energy. I don't know. But it may be an energy issue that you may still, even though you're trying for a resonance effect, you may still need vast quantities of energy beyond what we're capable of generating at the moment in order to get this to occur. And also I need to point out that, the sun has 98% of the mass in the solar system. So, if the sun, if the surface of the sun ripples in annoyance, we have a couple of bad millennia out here as planets.
Okay, thank you. The next question, in shape 1, your data had late 2011, time in which a wave will race from the South Pole to the North Pole over the course of a half day, 12 hours. This wave will be the result of the separation of a truly gigantic ice mass from Antarctica. Is this still in your forecast, and any time frames?
The last time we looked at all of this, there was in the Terra entity, the supposition is that we're still looking in northern hemisphere late fall into winter, so October, November, or December. We still show it within the Terra entity. The wave itself is, how do I say it? It's not particularly a terrible thing. It's not a tsunami that on the level of what hit Japan, for instance. So it may be even a minor event, and it may be lost in what we've got going on at that period of time. Because let me back up a little bit here. In the last report we were discussing, and I think even the report before that, so the previous two shape reports, we'd been discussing the October tipping point into building tension. And now, when I last looked at the data, we were in fact looking at three-pronged, asymmetrical, sort of a trident shape. And that what we're actually looking at is a sudden buildup of building tension language to a little peak in late October that almost instantly falls as we go into November into another cup shape that's very deep but not very wide. We have another sudden ramp up and then another fall and then a larger one in December. And so really the tipping point now into building tension is in December, but even then the building tension, while it rises very steeply, doesn't last very long, and then we go into release language again. A lot of this in that area from October onward.
Are you there, Clif? He's gone.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here. There's some level of interference going on. Yes, can we just pick up?
Yep.
Okay, so the Terra entity is what drives those emotional shapes within that part of our process from October through into 2012. There's a lot more Terra entity driving with of the model space, even though its growth rates are not as large as some of the other entities, its emotional sum levels are larger, and its effect on the overall mass of the trend lines of how humans are going to proceed emotionally is larger than the other entities. And so it still seems on. A lot of it is still Antarctic focused. There's all kinds of stuff about the ocean. But again, I don't know that the Antarctica stuff will be as dominating as we once thought, simply because there's a lot more chaos going on. And if we're all really worried about food at a very day-to-day level, we may not even hear about it. We may not even care anymore. A lot has changed in this last report, not in a good sense either.
Thanks, Clif.
Thanks, Clif. We might just have a quick 1 minute putty break, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I've still got good coffee and water here, and I'm watching them back this truck up. So yeah, no problem.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, we're now talking about the data wall, data gap hard stop. Kirk, you got a question for Clif?
Yes, Clif. I know this is something of a moving target, but can you now clarify on the data wall as you see it?
There's a number of possible explanations, and I'd had them all well formulated, and I thought I knew what the hell was going on in a broad sense. And then I ran into this issue of having to filter and refilter as the last report was being prepared. And it increased my processing time. Of course, I'm acutely aware of that, so I really dug into it, and I started looking at some stuff. Now, it's made me throw out a couple of previous hypotheses and formulate some new ones. I don't know that the hypotheses stand the test of time or will stand the test of time, but here's some of the interesting data. There has been a definitive shift in language, as though the vast sheeple of the planet are no longer even mildly curious about what's going on. They deliberately don't want to know. It is as though the herd knows it's about to go racing off the cliff, but it's running full speed, and it just doesn't want to know about the results of this. There's just been this weird shift in the language. We saw it in the ballooning of the immediacy values. Now, the coincident fact of the internet being disrupted this year, which arose coincident to our predictions of the first data holes appearing, because we had the first data holes appearing in January of 2011, and as we went forward into this year, we started seeing various countries around the planet exercising levels of censorship and control and so on. So there's still the potential and probability that the censorship issue comes into it. Now, at that level, the hard stop may be the rise of absolute governmental control at some level, requiring licenses, etc., that we're not in a position to be able to meet or whatever, and we end up having to shut down. So it wouldn't be so much as a result of the internet changing or everybody being killed off at that particular date, but it may be indeed a result of how the powers that be respond to the events that they're afraid of, and they're continuing to clamp down. Plus, we now see that there's moves afoot within